Blah, blah, blah. Whatever you say.
Welcome. And today we'll dive into a couple of separate malicious compliance stories and reactions. Coming up we have: he wanted all his stuff back, so I made sure he got everything. Don't ever interrupt you while you're on the phone? Fine. And was told I had an 8.5 hour shift and not to leave early, so I started working for only 8.5 hours. Hi, this is Derek. I just put the drama llama, Fred, back in his pen so that I can do this quick video for you with some of the stuff that Fred found on Reddit earlier today. If this is your first time watching our videos, help me out by watching to the end, and then giving me some feedback in the comment area below. And if you want more of these videos daily, don't forget to like and subscribe, with notifications turned on for this channel. Oh boy, let's get ready for some malicious stories. Blackbird named Jude posted: he wanted all his stuff back, so I made sure he got everything. I posted this in our petty revenge and a lot of people thought it would fit well here. I just copied and pasted right from my other post. Obligatory, I'm on mobile, so forgive me for formatting. So my last relationship was beyond bad. He was all sorts of abusive and controlling. At one point I had the strength to break up with him, but then we got back together after we discussed some things. Stupid, I know, but yeah. Love and all that. Well, anyways, one of the things we agreed on was that he and I would stop drinking alcohol. Because he was beyond crazy aggressive when he drank. And I wanted to support his sobriety. This is really important. Fast forward about 8 months or so, and we got into a huge fight. And I not only broke up with him, I kicked him out of the house and told him he wasn't ever allowed back inside. We'd been living together over a year at this point, so his mom got in touch with me about getting his stuff. While on the phone with her, I could hear him in the background saying, "Make sure they get everything I own or bought. I want it all back." Apparently even stuff he gifted me he wanted back, but honestly I didn't care. I was happy to get rid of anything related to him. While cleaning our room up and gathering everything, I started to come across numerous bottles and cans of alcohol. It seems he had been drinking again for a while and was hiding the evidence in the room. I mean, he was hiding them under the bed, in his guitar case, rolled up in his clothes, in some old backpacks of mine, and so on and so forth. He had said he wanted everything of his. So any bottle and the few unopened cans I found went straight into one of the garbage bags of his stuff. By the time I had gathered everything up, I had 3 bags of stuff and one was basically all just the alcohol. Dropping them off was just so satisfying. He actually called moments after I left his parents' place ranting about how petty and immature I was being. My response? Well, you wanted all of your stuff back. And those definitely weren't mine. Plus I figured you'd probably need a drink to deal with the breakup. I promptly ended the call and blocked him on everything. Most satisfying thing I've ever done. I didn't put open cans or unscrew and bottle lids just for the fact I didn't want to risk ruining his stuff, as that'd be a huge headache and everything. What are your thoughts on Blackbird named Jude's malicious compliance story? Please share in the comments below. Here's how some Reddit members reacted to this story. Next, Attitude 9425 reacted with: good for you. It takes willpower to leave a bad relationship. One of my favorite quotes was from Robin Williams. I used to think the worst thing in life was to end up alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is to end up with people who make you feel alone. This man knew deep pain. Hiram Goldberg reacted with: good riddance to bad rubbish. Both figuratively and literally. Good for you. BB Mochi reacted with: lol. Honestly, I thought you showed restraint. I would have been canvassing the trash cans to see what I could send mixed in with his clothes. Can I ask what the final straw was? What caused the fight? Wasn't that story just crazy? Now let's go on to our next story. Lone Wolf Y13 posted: don't ever interrupt you while you're on the phone? Fine. Brother makes grandmother feel awful after I fell and break arm. My grandmother and my mother were both extremely strict about them not being interrupted while on the phone. One year while visiting grandmother, I decided to climb a large tree in her yard. I don't remember how high it was, but I was almost to the top. Now being 11, I of course climb onto a dead branch and it snaps. I fall, plummeting to the ground. As soon as I realize I'm alive, I notice I can't quite move my left arm. I tell my brother to go inside and tell our grandmother. Now, my brother has Asperger's and was so 2 years younger than me. He goes into the house, sits down and waits. I'm sure it was only a few minutes, but for me it seemed like eternity. Finally she hangs up the phone and asks him what was the matter. That's when he told her I fell out of the tree. At the hospital, somebody, the nurse or doctor, I don't remember, asked me about the details. I told them I lay there on the ground for a while. When I was asked why, my brother, who was in the office with us, said that he had to wait until grandmother got off her phone call to tell her. My grandmother had to explain to them what was going on. I do remember a social worker ushering them out of the room and asking some questions. After that, both grandmother and mother explained to us that if it's an emergency, we need to tell them right away. What are your thoughts on Lone Wolf Y13's malicious compliance story? Please share in the comments below. Here's how some Reddit members reacted to this story. Throwaway61419 reacted with, I've mentioned this before. Teach your kids when it's okay to be loud and interrupt and scream, before you wind up in situations like these. A little girl I babysat was stuck in a plaything, for who knows how long. She was always quiet and sweet, but one day it had been a little too long, so I went looking for her. I found her stuck and crying. I asked her why she didn't tell me, and she said she didn't want to interrupt me. I told her that when she's hurt she's allowed to interrupt or even scream. But she didn't believe me. I told her even if she's just really scared and needs help she can scream or be rude or interrupt. I could tell she wasn't going to accept this from me, so I had a talk with her dad when he picked her up. Please teach your kids that sometimes it's okay to yell, scream, be rude, or not listen to adults. Makes me wonder if she had been harshly scolded at home for interrupting. Magenta High 1 reacted with, I fell out my friend's tree house. One of the supporting branches led to the rest of the tree. Her dad told us not to climb that part, but I was hard-headed and did it anyway. I fell and hurt my ankle. My friend went inside, but our moms were having coffee and talking, so she bought me a cookie and we sat and watched my foot swell and turn blue. About an hour later her grandma came outside to check on us. Saw my foot and called my mom outside. She asked me why didn't I say anything. I said, you told me to never interrupt you when grown folks are speaking. Unless I was on fire, and I wasn't on fire. Growing up in the 70s with strict parents was awful. I always think of this kind of situation when people complain about modern parenting. I'd much rather be interrupted by excited kids 80 times than have my kids seriously hurt for hours. That's how it was with my children. Let me know when you are hurt. Nothing and nobody is more important than them. Queen Punkster reacted with, I think many of us have been in this sort of situation with our parents. It's an understandable response when your child is constantly interrupting to establish boundaries for them. Then the nuance is teaching them when to cross that boundary. I had a sports practice where I injured my hand and went to get my mom from the car for assistance. I kept playing and took a ball to the face. When I tapped on the window of the car to get her attention, she was reading and gave me the 1 moment signal and finished her paragraph. When she looked up and my face was covered in blood, she screamed and felt terrible, but it was kind of funny. Whoa, that story was really entertaining. Now let's go on to our next story. DorkyDad77 posted, was told I had an 8.5 hour shift and not to leave early. So I started working for only 8.5 hours. I work as a supervisor at a manufacturing plant. And I was hired for an 8-hour shift as the nighttime supervisor. As soon as I started, they changed and said they'd really consider the shift to be from 11 p.m. to 7:30. So they would need it to be 8.5 hours. I'm salaried, there wasn't much I could do. And it wasn't a big deal, so I said okay. As I get into a groove working there, I find out that the second shift supervisor is a train wreck. No one would describe him to me, just saying I had to meet him. He leaves an hour or 2 early from his shift 2 to 3 times a week. Friday nights he leaves the plant at 5:30. And tells them to call him if there are any problems. He calls out, at a minimum, once a week. It's psychotic. Every time he is out, I come in at around 8 p.m. to cover the last 3 hours of his shift and my full shift. At least once a week, I just do it. I figure the company is going to deal with it, but as time passes, they obviously aren't. Structurally, the company is just as bad as him. Infighting, rivalries, backstabbing, all of that. But I stay on night so I don't see it much. Then Sarah starts as my boss. I actually have 2 bosses, which is how every successful employee works. Sarah is a nightmare. Sarah wants me to work 11 to 11 on MTW, and 11 to 10 on Friday. I dig in my heels, document like crazy. And after a couple months of harassment, HR actually backs me up and she has to stop. But now Sarah is angry, and she sees me leaving at 7:15 one morning after coming in 2 hours early. She sends an email clarifying our time expectations. Second shift train wreck calls in that night, so I come in at 8, and the next morning, Sarah sees me leave at 7:10. I get an email saying she is coming in early to talk to me. And when she shows up, I'm getting a formal warning for my early departures. Going into my personnel file. I've never been written up in my life. During the meeting, with HR in attendance, she said I am expected to be there for my 8.5-hour shift. I made sure that the expectation was on record for an 8.5-hour shift, which HR documented. The next week, the second shift supervisor is out 2 days. After the first day, Sarah asked me the next morning why I didn't come in early, as there were problems on his shift. And I said I fulfilled my 8.5-hour shift, and I'm not responsible for his. They had to hire a contractor at $125 an hour to cover all of his missed time, which amounted to 19 weeks this past year. Eventually they hired a 4th supervisor at $85,000 per year to cover his gaps. Sarah got demoted, and I only ever worked 8.5 hours. What are your thoughts on Dorky Dad 77's malicious compliance story? Please share in the comments below. Here's how some Reddit members reacted to this story. Coder Joe 1 reacted with, "That's what they get for playing effing games. Wage theft is one of the most common crimes and it can happen to salaried employees too. We were arguing at one point about her time expectations. And she said you're a salaried employee. There are no time protections for you. If I ask you to work, you have to work." I responded by saying okay, then let's head over to HR right now. And make sure that's the correct policy to pursue. They wound up sending her to management training, but I don't think it really took. Chaplain Parker reacted with, "What do you mean you don't want to come in for massive amounts of unpaid overtime? We made you salary, you should be thankful. People blow my mind with the thought process of work expectations. Good for you." I grew up in an anti-union household. My grandfather had been a union welder for 40 years. And not long before he retired in the early 80s, a union official took off with a pension fund. It wiped him out. So there was no love for unions in our house. I felt that way for 40 years, based on what was said while I was growing up. Now, I worked here for 3 years. Pro-union. Completely see their use, and why they're important. It's insane. And finally, Nolan 358 reacted with, "I wouldn't say I'm pro or anti-union. Like most things in life, they are only as good as the people in them. They serve a vital purpose, but there are also a lot that are corrupt. So it needs to be a case-by-case basis." Well, there you have it. A perfectly great set of reactions from a bunch of upstanding citizens. Help support this channel by smashing the like and subscribe buttons. And hit that silly little bell as well to ensure you get the latest videos as they come out. Fred is always finding stuff for me to post regularly. So this is Derek signing off. Thanks for watching. Good grief, it sounds like Fred is out of his pen again. He must have found more stories for me to share with you. See you soon.